Hey Fosters! I'm here with our amazing vet tech Shannon, and we are going to talk to you about what heartworm is, how it's treated here at Coco's Heart, and kind of what to expect if you ever end up fostering a dog who is heartworm positive. So first, let's start out with what is heartworm?
So, lots of common misconceptions around heartworm. It's not an intestinal parasite. We call it a worm because it is. It's a worm, but it's a worm that lives in the heart. So, when they're pooping worms, it's not heartworm. We know the heartworm preventive, the Simparica Trio that you guys give, can make them poop worms, but those are other worms because it also gets rid of things like roundworms, hookworms, and so those are what you're seeing come out in the stool. Heartworm, you're not seeing that in the poop.
Super helpful to know. Another question I think fosters have a lot of the time is this a risk? Like, is this contagious to humans or other animals in my household?
Great question. So, dogs can only get it from a mosquito during a very specific time period. So, this is on the American Heartworm Association, so if you want to like look it up. But
get a little close up on here. If this isn't on the foster portal, we should put that on there too.
Okay, yeah. But basically, a dog that has heartworm has to be bitten by a mosquito. And then the mosquito keeps the larva from that dog in its body for keeps it in its body, and between the 10 and 14 day mark, that larva matures and can be given to another dog. So after that 10 to 14 day mark, then it can be given to another dog from that mosquito. So having a heartworm positive dog in your household is not going to cause your dog to get heartworm. It would have to be a mosquito that bit the heartworm dog, lives in your house for 10 to 14 days, then bites your dog. Also, if your dog is on its monthly preventive, we're not at risk anyway. They're protected.
And I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say generally in the Midwest area, it's less common for us to see heartworm versus dogs that are from like down south.
Yeah, we're really lucky because it's comes from mosquitoes that we get the hard frost and all the mosquitoes die.
Right.
So it's less likely to get it up here, but we need you to give the preventive all year round, because what happens is when the mosquito bites the dog, they give them something called microfilaria, which lives in the bloodstream. Those worms live in the bloodstream for up to 6 months. And so say the dog gets bitten in November and then you stop giving your heartworm prevention, that dog's not going to be positive on a test till October, or if it's bitten November, December, January, February, March, April, May. It'll show up positive in May. All those months that you don't see mosquitoes, that microfilaria can be living in their body.
And the preventative would take care of it.
Yes.
If it was just the microfilaria.
Correct.
I also heard you say 6 months. This is a huge thing because we do a test for that every 6 months when the dog is in rescue for that exact reason, right?
Yeah. So when the dogs get to us, we don't know if they've ever had prevention before. So we do a test right away, and then we on their paperwork, if we have them in 6 months, we test them in 6 months. But we also have the test due in 6 months from when we did it, so that when they're adopted, they get tested again in 6 months, because we don't know what happened before we got them. So if they have microfilaria living in their body, it could pop positive 6 months from when we get them, even though they contracted it before they got to us.
Totally. Okay, so can you talk a little bit about what the treatment process is like? So let's say I have a foster dog, I bring them in for their intake exam, they do the blood test, it turns out positive. What are the next steps?
So the next step is we want to get them spayed or neutered as soon as possible, whatever they need for anesthesia. Because when they're on, well, as long as they're healthy enough for that. If a dog is really sick with heartworm, then we're not doing anesthesia. We're doing the heartworm treatment first, but that's pretty rare. So as long as they're stable and healthy and don't have any effects on the heart yet, we're doing the spay, neuter, dental as soon as possible so that we can do the anesthesia and then start our heartworm protocol. If you ever have a foster that winds up having heartworm, we get you one of these sheets, and it walks you through every process, step we do and when, and getting it scheduled. So, upon finding a heartworm positive dog, we start by taking chest x-rays, looking in there. We check for microfilaria in the blood. We look at that under the microscope. Usually when we find them having heartworm here, they don't have any microfilaria anymore because you guys have been giving the Simparica Trio, which is great, which means they're not going to have more worms take hold in their heart. We start on doxycycline and schedule the surgery. And then after schedule the surgery within 4 weeks, and we do normal post-op NSAID, so that carprofen. But then later we're going to need to start doing steroids. So that's why we want to get the surgery done so they can have their pain medication, and steroids cannot be given together. It causes stomach ulcers, so that's why we want to do another reason.
Space it out a little bit.
Space it out. So then we do our first heartworm injection. It's drop off early in the morning, and they stay here for the day. It's painful, it's exhausting, and it's like running a marathon and then laying down and your heart won't slow down, and you're just they're exhausted. It's a hard day. And then 30 days later, we do a second injection, and then the next day we do another. So we do one on day 1, and one on day 30, and then one on day 31. And again, those injections are painful and they're exhausting, and it causes the worms in the heart to shake loose, basically. And then they have to go through the bloodstream, and it can be really hard on them.
So for that reason, if you are fostering a dog that is going through heartworm treatment, there's a couple of things you should know about. One is that we really don't want them to exert themselves, because of those worms in the heart and the bloodstream could cause potential damage if they're getting all shaken up in there. That's probably the technical term that you guys use, right? Is shaking up all the worms.
Yeah, you think that like when you're drinking like a boba tea, if you have a big straw, the little things are going to come up no problem. So that's the worms going through the heart. But if you start exerting them, there's like the blood vessels can constrict, or the blood's moving faster, and so then it's like moving to a smaller straw or trying to suck them all up at once, and then it can clog the vessels and cause clots and
big issues.
Yeah,
big issues. So generally speaking, if your dog is heartworm positive and on treatment, we want low activity level. A lot of times this means more crating than usual, and that's perfectly okay because it's for their health and for their safety. I've found that using mental stimulation can be really helpful during these times. Kongs, lick mats, snuffle mats, things to keep them engaged that's not physical exercise. And then with the steroid, usually prednisone, that is going to cause increased urination. So you're going to have to be aware that they're going to need more potty breaks. The last time I fostered a heartworm dog, we had more accidents than usual. Not that she wasn't potty trained, but she couldn't help it. It wasn't her fault. So that's just something you have to know and be aware of. But it's normal.
Yep.
And it's okay.
Thirstier, hungrier, pee more.
Which steroids do that to people too.
Yes.
It's kind of the same effects. So a couple more things I want to touch on before we wrap up. How do we prevent a dog from getting heartworm?
Give it its Simparica Trio.
There's a reason we call them preventatives, right? Like that's a big one.
That monthly tablet that comes stapled in your welcome care folder. You want to give that right away when you get home with your foster that first night. If not the first night, within 24 hours if you want to let them settle in. And then mark it right on that front of your folder. I gave it on the 5th, and then you give it on the 5th of every month.
And I would also like to add a plug. It's a really great idea for your resident animals to be on their preventatives as well. And there's lots of different kinds out there, whatever you and your veterinarian talk about. I personally give Simparica Trio to my own animals too, just for simplicity. But as long as your resident animals and your fosters are on their preventatives, the risk for these things spreading is very, very low.
Yeah. I've never seen a dog who's been on consistent heartworm medication get heartworm ever.
That's why they're so important, for sure. So last thing I want to touch on, unless there's anything else you have. So you may have heard us say before, if a dog is already tested positive for heartworm, we are not able to bring them into rescue. And that's because we have to abide by the Department of Agriculture's regulations for infectious diseases crossing state lines. Yet it still happens, right? Where we'll have a dog come to rescue and they do the blood test and they are heartworm positive. So I want to explain a little bit about why that happens. One of those things is, like we were talking about, it can be delayed to show up positive on the test. So they may have already had a test at the sender where we're bringing them from and it was negative, and then the next time they're tested here, it might come positive. Another reason could be that where we are bringing them from, for example, some of our breeder release dogs, we usually don't have the opportunity to do a blood test prior to them coming. And so those ones we might not know about.
Correct.
Would that be accurate?
Yep. Yeah.
So obviously we try to have heartworm not coming into the state, but the Department of Agriculture is aware of what we're doing and our treatment protocols, and they're on board with that too.
Yep.
Is there anything else about heartworm that you want to talk about?
weird note for my OCD brain. When I said write the 5th, it doesn't have to be the 5th. It's whatever day you give it on. Just mark it on your folder. That was just an example. And it just, heartworm prevention is, I can't explain to you how important it is. If a dog has to get those injections, it's painful. They get sick. They don't feel well, and they have to be in a
just
crate.
Exhausted.
Yeah, they wind up being crated for like 6 or 7 months straight until they're out of the hard window. And that's so sad. And it's more expensive to treat heartworm than to buy heartworm prevention for a dog for its entire life. And so it's cheaper. So even if you're thinking about your own animals and you want to skip it in the winter, don't. Please don't. It's cheaper to take care of all of that and so much easier on the dog if you do the prevention.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you, Shannon. And that's all about heartworm. Thanks for watching.